Good morning, good morning, good morning. Stevie the Guide here on the banks of the Guadalupe River. It is Thursday morning, June 18th, and I hope you're feeling good. If you're awake at this hour, which I always am, I've been awake since 2:30, and I don't know why that is. My mind lights up. It does it on its own. I don't ask it to. I just wake up at these wee hours of the morning, and I do a lot of thinking and meditating and sometimes singing out loud. And I do a lot of reading and sometimes I go back to sleep, and sometimes, like today, I just don't. And so I don't. It doesn't really bother me as long as I have energy and light in my mind. I roll. And so today, warning. I think I'm headed into dangerous territory here today. And I woke up once again. I woke up and I didn't have a clue what I was going to talk about. No preparation. I just bring it to you most often straight out of my heart, right off the top of my intuition. And because I love you and I love myself, I want to give it to you authentically and genuinely, just however it comes to me, and not try to worry too much about what people are going to think. And I still do. I care what people think. I care very much. But at the same time, if I was to color my message in fear of what the reaction is going to be, then you would not get an authentic, pure message. And so I have to roll, and there's someone there that's writing me a message, but it's hard for me to stop. Greg, how do I convince a 6-year-old wife to be intimate with me? Greg, baby, you're on your own with that one. But sharing a little love is a good thing. That's a universal thing. And Greg, that is what I'm going to talk about. Things that are universal. I had a pastor friend come over, and he's highly educated in the Bible, wonderful man, good friend of mine, and he has in recent years started to take a more broad perspective of spirituality, and he has begun to resist the notion that his little religion, his religious box, is actually too small, and it does not include the world. It closes people out, and that has bothered him, and that has the sort of the glass on the terrarium has begun to break, and that God and spirituality do not simply belong to him and his tribe in his church, his following. And he's a wonderful man, and these questions certainly have come to me, and I have been tagged. And what he was telling me was, yeah, sometimes I'm talking to people and they tag me as being a universalist. And has that ever happened to you, Stevie? And oh yeah, it happens to me. I was a member of Baptist Church for 20 years. I was a Christian missionary for 6 or 7 years, and I love the Lord. I am a devoted follower of Christ and his teachings, and learning about that Christ consciousness that I believe he was trying to teach us all right, and not just an exclusive group in their faith, their belief system, and so yes, I also have been tagged a universalist because I don't believe something as enormous and unfathomable as God or the universe or the great spirit, or however you define it in your limited English language. I don't believe it's containable in anybody's bailiwick. All right, and so yes, we had a wonderful conversation, my pastor friend and I, and it leads me into why. What happened to you, Stevie? What happened? What happened that made you expand out of that a certain sort of Baptist enclosure? What happened? And there's a long answer to that. There's a long answer. I came across this picture, which is in Thailand. That is Thailand about 1985. And you will see that's me with a Buddhist monk. And he's teaching me how to ring that brass bell at the Doi Tung Temple in northern Thailand. All right, and that was when I was raised, up until the age of about 16 or 17. I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I never adhered to that. I went to church. I learned some things. I'm grateful for learning some basics about Jesus. But all in all, I never bonded with the Catholic Church. There was no one that was ever unkind to me. They didn't hurt me, but I always felt it was a strange thing. These men who wear these elaborate costumes and these rituals and confession booths and all that. I mean, it never stuck with me, and so I wandered. And in my intuitive state as a young man of 19, I had attached myself to a wide array of oil exploration companies, and I traveled all over the world. And this led me into all manner of different cultures. I was never interested in oil exploration that much. I never really truly aspired to grow in that business. The thing that attracted me about oil exploration when I was 19 was that it was a vehicle to travel all around the world. And that's what I always wanted to do since I was a little boy. You've heard me say before, I was a big fan of Marlon Perkins of the Wild Kingdom and Jacques Cousteau, the scuba diver, and Johnny Quest, the cartoon. I mean, these were the things that grabbed me when I was a kid. And oil exploration swung the door to the world open to me as a young boy, really. And now as I look back on it, how young I was and the things I got to do when I was very young were amazing. And much of that had to do with being hired by a company called Geosource in Houston. And they started flying me around the planet. And then various oil exploration companies over a 10-year period. I worked with Geosource, Teledyne, Sizecom Delta, Rogers Exploration, Arma Geophysical, Fairfield Industries, and all these companies took me all around the planet. I worked in Latin America, Mexico, and the Gulf of California. I worked in northern United States, up in North Dakota, all the way down to Utah. I worked in up in Canada, in Newfoundland, up in the North Atlantic Ocean, and I worked in China and Southeast Asia for a company, Western Geophysical of Houston, had an office in Singapore, and I was hired there miraculously in 1985, and I got to go to People's Republic of China, and so I spent a lot of time running around the world. It was the type of job that you work, 2 or 3, 4 weeks on. Maybe in China we worked 2 months on, and you were continuously on duty for 2 months. But then you would get a 1-month vacation with plane tickets, with almost full pay and break pay and plane tickets to go wherever you wanted to go. You could go from Hong Kong, which was our base in Asia, to anywhere to your home base, which mine was in Houston. Some guys went to London, some guys went to Aberdeen, some guys went to Sydney, Australia, and Auckland, New Zealand. So wherever your home base was, you go from Hong Kong to there or anywhere in that radius, and they would give you a plane ticket for that. And so it allowed me to travel very extensively, that job in particular. And oil exploration opened the world to me, and so my exposure, and when I was wandering around in all these countries, Southeast Asia in particular, I always gravitated to the spiritual centers. If I was in Malaysia, I would go into the mosque. If I was in Thailand, I'd go into the Buddhist temples. If I was somewhere else I went to Sri Lanka and spent time there, and I went to the Hindu temples there. And also in Singapore, you have Hindu temples, and Singapore is a mixed bag of spirituality. And also just here in the United States, when I spent about a year in Hawaii, and I was very influenced by Buddhist culture there. And in general, travel exposed me to the world. And it was only later in about 1997 or 8 that I was attracted by Zig Ziglar into a Baptist church in Dallas, a very large Baptist church called Prestonwood. And after 20 years of international travel, I was drawn by Zig Ziglar, who's a famous motivational speaker, if you don't know who that is. And Zig Ziglar had a Sunday school class at Prestonwood Baptist Church, and I was drawn into that after this, wide exposure to the planet, the people, the cultures, the religions, and spirituality. I had a broad base of that, but I felt a sense of home and intimacy in the Baptist church, and it was really beautiful all the way through. And Zig Ziglar is an amazing speaker, and I wound up going through all that and accepting Christ, getting saved, learned the Bible. Over time, I learned the Bible intimately well, and eventually became a Christian missionary with my family, and we went down to Peru, which is a combination. Peru is a combination of Catholicism mixed with local spirituality, local Inca, or they call it Quechua Indian, but it's basically Inca spirituality. The Catholic Church has absorbed, as they do, the Catholic Church, in order to make their program more palatable, they absorb the local pagan spirituality into their program, and thereby, sort of blend the two together. And that's what they've done all over the world. So I went into that culture, but I found safety and comfort for me and later for my family in being a part of a church, having my kids go to Sunday school, going to church on Sunday and hearing a message. And it was only later, and if you've seen some of my other videos, in the last 3 or 4 years, I had a series of naturally occurring sort of shatterings and awakenings, like my pastor friend who came to visit last week, sort of shatterings and awakenings. And I read an interesting quote about the Apostle Paul and how he had to be shocked or jolted into his awakening. That's what happened to me. I don't claim to be the Apostle Paul by any means, but what I do claim is that there was a series of very shocking, shattering, shaking type of events that happened to me along the way that opened me up to and broke sort of the glass off of my sort of spiritual terrarium, that it did not belong to me and my tribe. Spirituality in a connection with the divine is universal. It is universal. And I made a number of universal observations, as have, anybody who actually observes humankind. Love, friendship, kindness, family, breathing, health, all these things. We are all actually born. We are all physically going to die, and the construct which has been built around those universal principles, the spiritual fire that is within each of us, the light that lights our mind and our heart and our spirit, are universal. All right. They belong to everyone, and without prejudice, without exception. John F. Kennedy gave a speech long ago that comes to mind, which is, so let us not be blind to our differences, but let us also direct our attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safer for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. We are all mortal. And what he's driving at there is, that's John F. Kennedy, back before they killed him. We all were brought here. In my view, God brought us all here, and he's taken us all home. The question is, how do we live here? How do we change? How do we distill off all of the heavy vibration off of us and attain that pure spirituality? You know, I was telling a friend of mine just yesterday that it's like a distillery, being here and going through this obstacle course of life, and we get covered with all this sort of heavy material, and it is our job to distill ourselves out. If you know what a still is, you know, that you cook moonshine in, you know, whiskey or whatever. Basically, a still is a pot where you boil all the heavy material. You cook it all and mix it all, and it gets up to a certain temperature, starts breaking all the molecules apart, all right? And then the steam comes off of it. You don't drink the boiled liquid, all right? The steam comes off of it and goes through this coil, and what drips out of that is the pure essence, the spirit. All right, the spirit drips out of the still. All right, and I believe when you do that and you heat up, I mean, by asking questions, by turning over, by challenging established hierarchies and questioning these authorities that have taken charge of spirituality. I think by the questioning, by the intuitive feeling, that you actually are heating up and cooking these heavy things, and not to mention the negative vibrations that you have by cooking down the lower quality things that you eat, the lower quality things that you consume on the internet. You are actually eating that stuff, ladling this stuff into your mind. You know, when you look at garbage on the internet or you listen to garbage from people, you can tell the heavy vibrations, you know, and the more sensitive you become to this, the better you get at redirecting or discarding that which is heavy and not helpful to raising your vibration, your spiritual essence, and you distill out. This is the process. You identify and distill out or change and what they call transmute what is heavy and unuseful into energy that is wonderful and lovely and helpful to yourself and others. And so it is a distilling process that we are going through, all right? Distilling out that, you know, and the notion that I get God, me and my tribe get God, but nobody else gets God, that's a problem, all right? And to me, that is a type of prejudice. And what they asked me, what happened to you, Stephen? What happened that made you change? The answer is long, but it's a combination of things that date way back into my international travels, all right? My exposure to human beings all over this planet, and the things that are different in a mosque, in a Buddhist temple, in a Hindu temple, in a Christian church, the things that are different, but the common core is this universal spirit of love and kindness. All right, this is what Jesus was teaching. The ability to relax oneself down and commune with the Father, with the divine, Mother, Father, God, universally is available to everyone. All right, and it's just that institutions over time have done what human beings do. Okay, and what do human beings do? And what are we seeing chronically all over the planet right now? All right, and what is all this conflict about? It's about the desire to monopolize, the desire to have a monopoly, to control. All right, to control the money, to control trade, to control the behavior of people, to control the spiritual element. These control factors, this lust for power, that it's mine, it's not yours. I'm reminded of what's that? Bilbo Baggins on Lord of the Rings, and he's got this ring, and Gandalf is saying, "Here, hand me the ring," and he's about to hand over the ring, and he's going, "No, it's mine, it's my precious." You can't have it. All right, you cannot control it. I have a problem with people who try to take God like a firefly and put him in a jar and say, "I got this." It does not work that way. All right, it doesn't. And God bless them. My chosen tradition is Baptist. All right, my Baptist religion is my tradition that I love, and it has clearly pointed me in the direction of the divine. It has clearly educated me in all sorts of ways about how to connect with the divine. All right, that enormous thing that no one can define or contain. The Baptists have helped me tremendously, but so have the Buddhists. So has my observation of Muslims and Hindus and so forth. Spiritual people from all over the world, even the atheists. All right, I was in China, working in China with a guy named Mr. Wei, and Mr. Wei was my translator, and we went to in China, and that was in 1985 and 86. I worked on a ship that was anchored about a mile offshore, and that was our base. I lived on that ship with about 12 Western geophysical guys and about 60 Chinese nationals. That was in 1985 and 86. I mean, people were still riding bicycles over there a lot more than they drove cars, all right? There wasn't all this pollution back then because their industry hadn't, blown wide open. And we had... among other things, we were anchored offshore, and every day we'd launch all these little boats, these little inflatable Zodiac boats, and we would shoot these seismic lines. We had a big compressed air gun barge, and we'd lay out all these geophones, and we worked with the Chinese. Basically, we were a training team because in 1985, the oil business had tanked completely, and we were lucky to even have jobs, but the Chinese bought a big package of equipment from our company, Western Geophysical, and it came with a 12-man training team. And I was the 12th man that was hired. I was so lucky to get that job. It was meant to be. It had to be. So this one day we get in a Volvo hovercraft, which was the coolest this thing was like a sports car on the water. It was better than any ski boat I've ever driven, and I've driven a lot of them. But this thing, where you turn it on, and 3 guys could get inside of it. It's this orange hovercraft. I got a picture around here somewhere, and it would lift off the water, and you fly over the water in this thing. And only, not very high off the water, but you could also drive it on the land. And so we had to go to this village one day, and we had to go to the land and go to the village and find out where the survey crew on the land was, because our communication tower had been knocked down, and we had to talk to these guys about coordinating the lines on the land. They were shooting dynamite on the land, and we were shooting compressed air guns on the water, and we had to match up with them navigationally. All right, and this was the problem. It had shut us down, and so we cruised to this little village in our Volvo hovercraft with our orange survival suits, because it was very cold outside, and we got these goggles. I'm wearing a Sony Walkman. You know, it was kind of like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. You remember that part where he's in the DeLorean and he's run into the barn, you know, and that family comes out and he's wearing that, you know, radiation suit, and they think he's from outer space. All right, that's what it was like. We take this Volvo hovercraft where me and these two Chinese guys are dressed up in these orange suits, and with Ray-Ban sunglasses and stuff, and we cruised into this little village that it looked like it hadn't seen visitors since before the Cultural Revolution. I mean, this was an isolated place. And here we come. Well, there's a gradual approach up onto the land, and we drive this thing right up onto the bank and into town a little ways, and there's dust and there's noise, and you know, we land this thing in their village, and we weren't supposed to go up on the land, but we did, mainly because I wanted to, and all the people of the village, I mean, everybody dropped what they were doing and came running out to see what was going on. And we pop out of this thing like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future, you know, with our radiation suits on. And people freaked, man. You could hear a collective gasp going across the crowd, all right? And you know, we started, I told them, the translators, hey, ask them where that survey crew is. And they said, no, you got to go talk to the elder of the town. And this guy, this old guy, is about the only one that didn't come running over, because he knew we would have to come to him. And we go over and talk to this guy, and he's, you know, he invites us into his hut, you know, with his wife, and she fixes us some tea and stuff like that, and we got to sit and talk with him properly, you know, and pay him a call. We had to pay a visit to his house, and so we go and we sit down, and the whole rest of the town is hanging around outside of his home, you know, wondering what the heck we're there for. And so I start asking questions. He goes, no, wait a minute, where is this guy from? And while we're talking, his wife is busy making tea, you know, making little cakes, you know, on the fire. It's very simple stuff, but the hospitality and the love we felt was evident. And he asked where I was from, and they told him I was from Megwa, which is America, and he was like, he didn't know what that was. Never heard of America. 1985 in rural China, this elder of the town, America didn't ring a bell with him. All right, never heard of it. All right, and he thought we were talking about. They pointed out over the water, and he thought they were talking about Korea. All right, that's where he's from. They said, no, it's much further over there. And I remember that was striking, that this guy didn't know what America was. And then he said, well, how did he get here? Did the white guy get here in a boat? And they said, no, he got here in an airplane. And he didn't believe that, because he knew for a fact that only the Chinese government had airplanes, you know, not anybody else in the world. It was China had all the aircraft. He had seen the aircraft, but he knew all of them were of the Chinese government, not any other country. Nobody else had that. So this guy was of limited perspective, and but But the one thing that was striking was his kindness. His kindness, his love. These are dyed-in-the-wool atheists, okay? They in the Cultural Revolution, and most people, especially young people, don't have any clue what the Cultural Revolution was all about. But and you see shades of that going on right now here in the United States. But Chairman Mao Zedong, back in the late 40s, early 50s, he sent all these wild young people all over China and destroying things and killing people and taking anybody in authority and either beating them or killing them or sending them to re-education camp. And so people shut down. Religious organizations, they were killed or run out of town. And even way down in Tibet, that's when they start, really tearing up Tibet and all these gorgeous historical temples all over Tibet. So it was widespread chaos for years. And therefore, people felt it safe to be atheists. They didn't believe in anything, all right? We're just fishermen. That's it, all right? We don't read. We're not leaders. We're not doctors. We're not, librarians. We're just nobody, all right? The best survival tactic you could have was to become invisible, to not be anyone, to not stick out, to blend, to wear the same clothes, think the same thoughts, to blend in. This was my experience in China in 1985. All right, that people, they all looked the same. They all wore the same sort of green or gray clothes. They all, seemed to move with the same sort of, sort of like lemmings, and they wouldn't do anything that, was independent, without authority, without asking permission. And they were afraid, very afraid. If you stuck out differently, if you acted intuitively, you could be killed or punished in ways that you don't want to know about. All right, and this was China in 1985. So these people are atheists. You don't even talk about God, right? And but the universal thing, God, the light of God came out in them, and I've seen it all over the world. Doesn't matter what religion they have, the same things are common, and it was the love I felt in their household, the kindness, the care, the personal attention, the looking in the eyes and connecting. Human beings. When you take a human being out of a group and you get them individually, especially like in their private home, in their safe element, and you sit with them and you look with them, even if you don't speak the same language, there's a vibrational language that happens, and it dissolves any barriers that are between you, and it makes us all universally connected. All right, and so it is person to person, belly to belly, which in my observation is the best way to connect with people without all the trappings and garments of government and religion and socioeconomic status, all those borders that supposedly separate us. They don't really, all right? They don't if you will relax and allow it. I got a quote from Mark Twain. And this strikes right to my heart. Travel is fatal to prejudice, to bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's life. That's from Mark Twain's The Innocents Abroad. Roughing It, Mark Twain. A matter of fact, not to lose the point. When you ask me what happened, that opened me up from a Baptist to simply a Christ follower and student, the fact is that although I learned many wonderful things and made many, many wonderful friends in the Baptist church, it became too confining for me. And what happened to me actually happened long before I ever got there. My broad perspective is what happened. Travel was fatal to my prejudice and my bigotry and my narrow-mindedness. It killed it. And even though I was drawn into the Baptist church and raised my family in there, and I'm very, very grateful, and it is my chosen tradition of how to direct my thoughts towards God and the divine. Ultimately, at the end of the day, my perspective had to be universal because I consider myself a member of this earth and of the universe. And yes, I do believe we have neighbors out there in that big neighborhood in the universe. And I think it is quite narrow-minded to think that this is the only planet with a few people on it, all right? But that's another story for another day. But I cannot. And so as this cognitive dissonance created friction on me, I was shocked like Paul, like they said the Apostle Paul was. It caused a shock and a cracking open in me. And if you look somewhere, I can't remember where I read that, but Paul had such a stubborn, willful personality that the only way for him to acquire that inner spirit, that divine connection, that vision that he had on the road to Emmaus, I believe it was, this vision of God, and the way he became the Apostle Paul, and not just Paul, or Saul, not just Saul. The way he became that was he was shocked and broken open, like a chicken hatching out of an egg, like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon, and from a confined space. There was a breakout, a breakthrough, and that's what happened to him. And he acquired the Christ consciousness, and that's what happens to people. And I believe that is universally possible to any and every person, no matter what their religious tradition may be. This ability to break out of the heavy mental material, the heavy left brain logical, and break open into a right brain intuitive, that higher bandwidth, that higher Christ consciousness. And it creates in us a balance, not just a dominant left brain logical. Our left brain logical is so dominant, fear-based, goal-based, greed-based, that it shuts out the small, still voice, the inner child, the right brain intuitive. But sometimes there's a shock, a breaking. I call mine a series of shatterings and awakenings that occurred. And if you look back in my YouTube videos, I try to give an explanation. It's called Stevie the Guide, The Forbidden Discussions. If you look through that, I attempt to try to piece together that breadcrumb trail that awakened me. And it's not something I was looking for, all right? At least not consciously. But I was questioning and wondering, and I had become confined inside that religious box. I was not allowed to ask questions that were naturally coming to my mind. I was told to shut up and be quiet, and why am I creating a disturbance? I've got too many questions, all right? And when they could not provide the answers, I was becoming stifled and stunted. And that is my honest experience. And I mean no disrespect to a wonderful institution, but it had become too small of a closet to live in. All right, and my experiences all around the world prepared me for that. Little did I know, but that's what happened, and that is why, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, moms and dads, I believe that there is no border between you and me, all right? There is no distinction between spirits together. The word namaste means the spirit in me recognizes the spirit in you. You can leave all that other shit at the door, all right? You can leave all that other packaging at the door. I try not to cuss. This is part of my mission, to overcome what I've been trained in, working offshore with a bunch of military people, working with my dad who comes from a bunch of baseball players, and working around my brother who cusses all the time, but so do I. I do my best to become better, to distill off that heavier material as I go along to the day I die, and to heat up what I have in me, the collective experience, the observations, the thoughts, the education, and the feelings. All right, and that's really where we're getting to, isn't it? It's the feelings that count. All right, and thoughts and directions and idea. They're important, but the feelings have got to be nurtured. The sensitivities have to be grown and cared for. And that means letting go of that left brain logical to some degree, right? Not getting rid of it because you need it. You need it to carry out your mission. But it is the right brain intuitive that brings the broader perspective. It is the spirituality, and it will give you the broad strokes of what you're supposed to do. The left brain logical gives you more of a micro, more of a, it's the one that, the intuitive is the map to follow, and the left brain logical is the following of that map. But you've got to have the map, or otherwise you just whatever you're taught by some other human. There's a quote. Let me see if I can find it for you. Let's see here. I bet you I can find it real quick. There's a great quote here that says, it's by Howard Thurman. There is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. It is the only true guide you will ever have, and if you cannot hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. All right, that's Howard Thurman. He lived from 1900 to 1981. Let me read that to you again. That's a very important quote. There is something in every one of you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. The sound of the genuine in yourself. You're waiting, you're listening for it. It is the only true guide you will ever have. Your intuition, your inner knowing. It's the only true guide you will ever have. And if you cannot hear it, you will all of your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. Right? That's Howard Thurman. All right? You chew on that. You put that in your pipe and smoke it. That is real. It's just like, and I'm going to say it again and again because I love this quote, right? In that movie, Walk the Line, about Johnny Cash, and he's in there trying to get a record deal with Sam Phillips, right? At Sun Records. And it's a great scene, the best scene in that movie. And Johnny Cash is, questioning why, he's playing some little common everyday tune, gospel tune. And Sam Phillips, the character Sam Phillips in the movie, he says, listen, if you were laying out in that gutter dying and you had a chance to sing one song, one song that people would actually want to hear before your dirt. One song that would let God know what you felt about your time here on earth. One song that would sum you up. You telling me that's the song you would sing? That same old Jimmy Davis tune we hear on the radio every day about your peace within and how it's real and how you're going to shout it? Or would you sing something different? Something real. Something you felt? Because I'm telling you right now, that's the kind of song that people actually want to hear. That's the kind of song that truly saves people. It's not about believing in God, Mr. Cash. It's about believing in yourself. All right. I love that quote. I love it. And it's such a challenge. It throws down the gauntlet. You know, are you going to just be a follower? Are you actually going to follow your inner compass, your inner radar, your inner navigation? All right. And this is not an easy thing in a world with giant institutions who are trying to tell you what to think, all right? Trying to tell you what to buy, tell you who you are, tell you what you're going to go and learn in school, you know? Shape you into their image, all right? You are a unique flower, all right? You're unique in the world. There never was anything like you, there never will be. And especially if you combine with the right person, the male and female part, and that energy is compatible. And that's a whole nother talk for another day. But you are a unique individual, all right? You have unique qualities and gifts that want to come out. And intuitively, you know this. When you dream or when you sit quietly and think about things and you get a passion for something, there is something each and every one of us is supposed to do here. But oftentimes, the world tells us that we can't, or that it's wrong, or that it's evil, or that we're not good enough, not strong enough, not wealthy enough, don't have, we're not realistic, all right? It tells us all these things and how to conform. My 2 years being the host of a weekly gathering of people, physically, not online. It's called the Forbidden Discussions. And that has been a real joy to me, because there's a healing thing that happens when I start to tell people some of these more esoteric things that have happened in my life. A Baptist missionary with a 20-year membership in the Baptist church will tell you honestly and authentically that I was visited by some supernatural beings when I was 5 years old. They transported me out of my bedroom into the front yard, and they shot me with a vibrational device. And I remember it like it was yesterday. They're as real as any human being, all right, that I know of. It was a very clear thing that happened to me. Very shortly after that, and I believe as a result of that event, I had an out-of-body experience where I flew over the elementary school in a transparent body while I watched my physical body walk down the sidewalk. All right? And I realized the separation of the spirit from the carnal body. All right? And this actually happened to me. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was about 5 or 6 years old. All right, and from that point forward, I've never been afraid of death, ever. That is part of the reason I felt the freedom to throw myself out into the world without anyone, with very few resources, and have been quite spirit-led. I didn't really know that when I was younger, but as I look back over the breadcrumb trail of my own spirituality, I see that I was spirit-led, spirit-guided, spirit-protected from death numerous times. And I've talked about how I flew out of the back of that pickup truck over 3 cars, completely unscathed, and landed about 50 yards away. Anyway, all I'm saying is that universally, we all have a connection to the divine. The divine God lit our minds, makes our heart beat, makes us breathe. We don't do it. It does it. It does it. All right. And the it is, to me, you can conceive of God any way you want to, but to me, I look at it as a very broad entity that's unfathomable. All right. And all I know is that it works. All right. It works, and it operates. The fuel and the roadmap that will get you to God, all right, is distilling out all the heavy garbage. Cooking your distillery until the steam of love and care and kindness and goodness and your ability to settle down and connect with the divine, that fire, that spirit, that steam, that is out of the right brain intuitive, and it's squashed. It's been squashed down, trained out, you know, and all these things that people historically over time immemorium have used, many of them have been beaten out of us, taken from us. It's my belief that people long ago who knew how to build pyramids had a consciousness level that was higher than ours, because we don't know how to do that stuff. And our planet is littered with these the evidence of this great civilization that was here, and we are connected to them. I believe the way to get back to a place where there is harmony in this world is to try to connect with the divine without all the parameters of authority, all right, and to settle oneself down, to clean one's body up, clean the temple. Start cleaning the temple day by day. You know, your physical body is the carrier, all right? So clean it out. Clean out the chemicals. Clean out the junk food. Clean out the booze and the drugs. You know, clean out everything, all right? Clean out your mind, all right? Stop watching, you know, the news 24 hours a day. Stop, all right? You don't have to be keeping up with all that stuff that gives you a little charge when you watch it. You don't need it. You know, keep up with the world once a week if you want to. But start keeping up with your divine right. Your royal birthright is to have a connection with your maker, with that which you are connected naturally and universally. If you do that, I believe, it's my true belief, that once we get into correct alignment with our divine source, we start to project that out to human beings all around us, and we feel it. And anybody can do this. Hey, I ain't nobody, all right? But once my little generator starts working, I go up to people, I say, hey, have I told you that I love you today? That's a good thing to do. It shocks them and surprises them. And when the open expression of love is not a common thing, you know, and people are fearful, people are lonely, people feel like they're isolated. And the generation of love and care and sharing with people is a godly expression. And that's what would Jesus do anyway? You know, would he stop at the borders of religion? No, he wasn't a member of any religion. Jesus Christ, he was a man with Christ consciousness. All right, he had broken through to this higher realm. He had the higher perspective, the broader bandwidth. All right, that we all have the potential to have, and that, my friends, is what he was trying to teach us. That's how it comes to me naturally. I don't mean to offend anybody, and I'm certainly grateful for all the religious teaching I've had in the Christian church as well as all around the world, and certainly from this man. I can't even remember his name, but this was one of the more kind spiritual people that I have ever met, and he's a monk from the Buddhist temple. That's the Doi Tung temple in Thailand. It's the highest temple, way up on a mountain, and that's young Stevie right there. That's young Stevie learning how to ring the bell. And I was actually invited down to their home, which is a monastery in the mountains in northern Thailand in a place called Chiang Rai, which is outside of Chiang Mai. And I slept down in the caverns with them. They have this beautiful temple inside these caverns, and I wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning and I hear the monks chanting in there, and you would feel this vibration, something I will never ever forget in my life. It wasn't just the kindness they shared, but when the monks chant, they're actually, and what I talked about in one of my other talks is, they're going out of their mind. They're letting that left brain logical relax, and they're allowing the spiritual to come forward, the right brain intuitive. They're relaxing, and that's why they're so calm, is because they practice meditation, they practice chanting, they practice those things that bring balance to this amazing computer. And when you get this computer tuned, it works a lot better than this, all right? When you get this computer tuned well, this thing is, I'll say it again and again, this thing, everybody seems to accept that you can, that this thing operates on invisible waves, okay? This thing operates on invisible energy waves, all right? And why do you suppose it's hard to imagine that this thing operates on invisible energy waves, all right? Answer me that, Mr. Wizard. Why? We're taught that this doesn't operate on the same waves that this does, but it does, all right? It does, and you need to develop it because that is your connection, in my opinion. And so I thank all you nice people for coming to visit. I love your message today. I love you, Martha, and I love all you folks that have come, Monica, and it's hard for me to see. But I love all of you. And so anyway, as you know, I didn't have anything prepared to say this morning as usual. But when I get into a flow state, it just happens. And so I love you. And that's why I'm going to bring it to you authentically any way I know how. And even if I look ridiculous, even if I get it wrong, you know, they say if something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly in the beginning. So, you know, go and do it. Gary Vaynerchuk, what does he say? If you want production, you know, if you want some forward motion with your dream, with your vision, make something, do something. You know, don't just sit around and study it all the time. Do it. And with regard to spirituality, there's a lot you can do to bring balance. I love you, and hey, I got to go to work. I don't know about you, but I love you, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Yeah, and to have a happy Thursday, and God bless you. I love